Welcome to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo. Let's just jump right in here. So today is the day where Dr. Anthony Fauci appears before Senator Rand Paul's Senate committee. And what's evident already is that Dr. Fauci is going to be pleading the Fifth Amendment, which of course he has every right to do. And even though that's not supposed to be an admission of guilt, certainly most people out there will view it as such. But as I was watching the proceedings, and I was reminded of another hearing years ago, and the person that was being deposed was an individual named Lois Lerner. And Lois Lerner, and I don't remember which committee she was testifying before, and I don't even know if it was the House or Senate, but I remember she was testifying. And she started off by reading a statement. Now, I knew enough about the law to know that once she read that statement, and because the statement was certainly concerned the issues that she was properly subpoenaed to testify about, it took away her right to invoke the Fifth Amendment. Yet, when it came time to answer questions, she invoked the Fifth Amendment, and she refused to answer the questions. And I remember at the time when I was watching all of this, I'm jumping up and down. I'm livid because nobody was raising the point that she had already waived her right to invoke the Fifth Amendment when she issued the statement that she did, basically denying the allegations of the corruption that she committed at the IRS, particularly against conservative groups. She prevented them from being able to get a tax-exempt status, which prevented them from moving forward. And, I mean, this was clearly a political hit job. And in the immediate aftermath of this hearing, the only person that I heard that came out and was as equally livid as I was Representative Trey Gowdy. And Trey Gowdy, went on the news and, he said she waived her right to the Fifth Amendment. She made a statement basically denying the allegations that were being leveled against her, and then refused to answer any questions about it because she could incriminate herself. And the legal process now was what should have happened, and of course it didn't happen because Republicans don't push back. What should have happened is they should have went to a court and got a judge to order her to answer the questions. And then if she didn't answer the questions, she could be then incarcerated until she decided she wanted to answer them. But of course there was no pushback and she was let off the hook. And the reason that I tell this story now is because in watching the hearings, and everyone, we all know how these hearings work. Everybody gets basically 5 minutes, and it's a Republican and a Democrat, Republican, Democrat, and they go through the thing. And there have only been, or at least I've only seen, 2 Democrats recognized by the chair for their 5 minutes. And what's interesting to note is they spent the whole time pontificating about how this was terrible, that they're trying to trap Dr. Fauci, and that there are so many more important things to handle than this. And it's clear that the Democratic Party is still working in conjunction with Dr. Anthony Fauci, because neither of the Democrats have asked him one single question. So, I strongly suspect they knew that this was going to be the modus operandi at this hearing. And this is problematic because Dr. Anthony Fauci was complicit in the deaths of millions of Americans. And so far, nothing has happened. Yes, I know he got a pardon, but it was one of these last-minute pardons. And I'd be willing to bet $1 to a donut there that he was the one, because certainly he knows of all of the crimes that he has committed. I believe he sought a pardon, and they so graciously gave it to him. But I also believe that President Joe Biden has testified that he was unaware that that was all going on. And so that pardon needs to be challenged. Now, early in the proceedings, one of the things, they got to make a circus of these things. And apparently they had recommended to Dr. Fauci that his counsel would not be allowed to sit at the table with him. But it was a recommendation, it wasn't an order, and his counsel decided that he was going to sit there anyway. And his counsel was insistent upon talking. And the chairman, Senator Rand Paul, he explained that they're not interested in hearing from an attorney. They are very interested, and that's why they subpoenaed Dr. Fauci to come and testify. And so one of the things that gets me here is listening to these Democrats. How anybody can support any of these people for re-election is beyond my ability to comprehend. And I think most of them would get voted out of office in a free and fair election. That's what I believe. But they're certainly complicit now in the continued cover-up. And what is the problem? Dr. Fauci was financing, with American taxpayer money, gain-of-function research. Now, I know he's claiming it's not gain-of-function research, and this is a definite leftist ploy. Let's just redefine the words. And under our new definition, it's not what we're doing. We saw this so famously with the Biden administration and a recession. Forever, the definition of a recession was 2 consecutive quarters of GDP being negative. And when we reached that goal, they couldn't come out and say, hey, well, we're in a recession. So they just redefined the word, and once they redefined it, we were no longer in a recession. But we were in a recession. Now, how do I know we were in a recession? Well, I look at the BLS jobs report numbers. Now, as Biden so famously claimed, his administration created over 1 million jobs in the 4 years he was president. And it is true, I'll concede that if you total up the initial numbers spewed out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were over 1 million jobs created. But what they leave out of this equation is the fact that these numbers always get revised in each subsequent month. And all those million jobs in the subsequent revisions were all erased. and there was actually a loss of jobs under the Biden administration, which that makes really a logical sense as to what should be happening. And that has nothing to do with either party. It just has to do with the population. And we're at the point where, the birth rate has declined, and because of that, not counting the illegals, but if you look at the regular population, our population should be declining, and if our population is declining, our GDP should likewise be declining, but that wasn't the case. But anyway, I've gotten off a little bit off the topic, but it was very depressing to know that they did not pursue any of the available legal avenues with Lois Lerner, and she was able to get away with her charade. And that was a situation that really hurt the Republican Party. And surprisingly, they were still able to prosper, I guess some might say, around this orchestrated campaign to hurt Republicans. But the problem is, and the problem is going to remain, the Trump DOJ. I don't know what they're doing. Dr. Fauci should have been indicted long ago. The evidence is there. Senator Rand Paul has made a couple of criminal referrals, and he's attached all the evidence. Now, the only potential argument, it seems to me, that Dr. Fauci would have is that he received that pardon. But that pardon has to be challenged. They kicked out, eventually, Rand Paul, and I think he should have done it much sooner. And the reason I say that is because words matter. If you make a statement, you need to adhere to the statement. And Rand Paul made the statement that, look, we're not here to hear you. You're not authorized to talk. And if you say another word, you're going to be ejected. Well, the problem was that the guy said a lot more words before Rand Paul ultimately decided to have him removed. And one of the comments that was made after having this attorney removed by law enforcement was that Dr. Fauci still had another 5 or 6 attorneys present in the hearing. And see, this is why pushback is so important. Even if Dr. Fauci is not charged, and right now, knowing what is not happening at the Trump DOJ, I think it's fair for me to go out on the limb and say he's never going to be charged. And hold on one second here while I check something out. Well, I'm back, and I apologize for that interruption, but perhaps that happened at an appropriate time because, as I've said before, and I'll probably be saying this many more times into the future, but that's something we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I have this short-term memory problem. And why do I have this problem? Well, the doctors haven't diagnosed me. I mean, they've given me all the tests and run me through everything. And I read a lot of news, and I was very interested. I read an article about a peer-reviewed medical study that was done on people who took those injections during the pandemic, of which I had 2. And it said that many of the recipients of these of the poison that they put in our body is resulting in people as they age having memories with their brain. And so I think there's the very clear possibility that these doctors know that that's why I'm experiencing this problem. But because they're also government doctors, they're not going to come out and be vocal about it. So I'm basically undiagnosed. And I know through the testing and everything that I don't have Alzheimer's or dementia. So I'm fortunate in that regard. But what happens is it's a short-term memory problem, and sometimes I just completely draw a blank. Now, many times I'm able to talk my way around it, and sometimes it's just better to take a pause and regroup and then come back on, and that's what I chose to do here. And during the break, I listened to a little bit more of the testimony of Dr. or I should say the lack of testimony from Dr. Fauci, other than his repetitively invoking the Fifth Amendment, which is the way it's supposed to happen. And as I referenced Lois Lerner, you're not allowed to go in and say, oh, no, I didn't do any of these things, and then refuse to answer any questions about those things. The law doesn't allow that. And so the Republicans should have pursued that when they had the opportunity. But see, the Republican Party is the party that doesn't push back. And because they don't push back, the Democrats, Socialists of America are constantly pushing the envelope a little bit further and further and further. At this point in the Trump administration, there is absolutely no reason why Dr. Fauci has not been indicted. Zero reason. Now, I realize that perhaps they're saying, oh, well, he's got this pardon. But if they also look at all of the information, and I heard Senator Ron Johnson, alluded to the fact on how that pardon occurred. And because they have the evidence of that, I can't imagine how it would be upheld in court. Yeah, I know that there's loony leftist judges out there who might, at the lower level, have ruled in his favor. But I think that ultimately, I think it would go to the Supreme Court, and I think it would have to be overturned because only the president can issue pardons. And in Fauci's case, we know that the president wasn't involved in the process. So, and this is a dangerous precedent that the Republicans, allowing it to go forward is just, I can't get it. I don't understand it. Other than I ultimately always fall back on, well, too many Republicans are corrupt as well, and so they don't want to speak up too loud because they're afraid that somebody might be exposing their transgressions. It's the only thing I can think of. But, and let's go back, with Lois Lerner, we know everything she did. We know what Clapper did, and we know what Brennan did. And all this information was out there. We know they lied to Congress. And when Donald Trump, in his first administration, he appointed Jeff Sessions, and Jeff Sessions was, I think it was a bipartisan vote where he was approved. Nonetheless, he was approved to be President Trump's first Attorney General. And he come out and announced, hey, no, we're not going to prosecute any of these politicians who lied. Although I don't know that he used the word lied, and it was clear to me that somebody was holding something over his head because he was a real law and order guy, and it made no sense to allow all of these criminals from getting away with their criminal acts. Because keep in mind, these are criminal acts against the American people. And I felt sorry for Donald Trump, and I fully understood why he ultimately fired Jeff Sessions. But then Donald Trump was informed that, if you expect to get another Attorney General approved by the Senate, you're going to have to find someone who everyone can support, and that person just happened to be Bill Barr. And I just wish we'd have known in advance that it was Bill Barr's father who first hired Jeffrey Epstein to be a teacher, even though he had no qualifications to be a teacher. But, and let me say that Bill Barr's father had a continual relationship with Epstein, and that also fell over towards Bill Barr as well. And so we can understand Bill Barr's actions and inactions, which is more appropriate most of the time, with the DOJ. So in Trump's first term, he never had a DOJ that was there fighting for Americans, because that's ultimately who the victims were. And so in his third term here, now in his second term, President Trump didn't get to make any nominations because the criminal element made sure that he wasn't sworn in, and they did so by cheating in the election. And everyone knows that happened. and they keep trying to hide it, and more evidence keeps coming out. And it's shameful that, again, nobody's been charged with any of this stuff. So when nobody gets charged, when we know about it, do we really think it's going to stop? No, because we were told during the arguments on capital punishment that you have to have a deterrent. If you don't have strong deterrence to crime, the crime's going to continue. And so let us move that theory over to the Democrats. And, you know, there's no pushback from Republicans, so what reason do they have to stop their illegal actions? There are none. And they keep pushing further and further and further, and the Republicans keep allowing it. And poor Donald Trump, he can't get a break because he picked Pam Bondi. And just like Jeff Sessions, Pam Bondi was a law and order attorney general here in Florida, which makes it hard to comprehend what happened once she was attorney general. See, I propose, you know, if you listen to all of the people out there, they will tell you that Pam Bondi is a woman who is looking to move forward in her career. But I think if she looked at the practicality and the reality of the facts, there's very little chance of her moving much further above being the Attorney General. And so I suspect that she was showered with gifts, much of which probably was illegal. I have no proof of that, but I'm sure that, pretty sure that that's what happened, because how else can you explain her inactions? You can't. And so Donald Trump rightfully fired her. But then what happens? The Assistant Attorney General, you know, I'm saying, hey, maybe this guy's going to turn out all right, because suddenly he's the acting Attorney General, and there were some indictments and stuff, and then Trump nominates him for the position, and suddenly there are few to no arrest forthcoming. And let me say, when I say no arrest, I mean no arrest of any of the prominent people, any of the ringleaders, the ones who are profiting the most from these illegal actions. You know, I'm sick and tired of hearing the Republicans talking about Ilhan Omar marrying her brother. You know, if the evidence is out there like they all claim, why hasn't she been arrested? You know, keep harping on the fact that she's a criminal getting away from it is not doing anything to help this country. In fact, it's just inciting the Democrats to take it to higher levels. And when you listen to them, they're telling you if they get back in power, they're going to pack the Supreme Court, they're going to do away with the filibuster, and they're basically going to make this a socialist country. I'm sure at some point in time they're going to dump our Constitution. They're going to dump the Bill of Rights. And then what happens when socialists consolidate their power? They start eradicating their enemies. They have them put on gurneys and sent to the mortician. That's what they do. And there's plenty of history to show that, which makes me wonder why so many of these Republicans are so quiet about the lack of action at the DOJ. Why aren't the chairmen of these committees who have done criminal referrals to the DOJ, why aren't they out in front of the cameras, at least weekly, complaining about the lack of action from the DOJ? But it doesn't happen, and the reason is because they're saying, oh, well, this is, we're a Republican and we're in charge and we don't want to make ourselves look bad. But, the public understands what's going on. At least I know that there's a good percentage of brain-dead people, but I think there's an equal amount in each party, and so they more or less equal each other out and neutralize each other. But we have to have pushback. And I don't know what is going to be forthcoming from today's hearing. I was a little confused in the beginning when Rand Paul was talking about something where Fauci had been directed that he is to answer these questions. And I'm confused because I'm just hoping they didn't give him use immunity because he needs to be charged. The fact that he hasn't been charged is reprehensible. This man was funding experiments in how to kill Americans, okay? And if Americans are happy with having, their families murdered without doing anything about it, so be it. They're going to get what they sat quiet through. Because, unfortunately, there are these rich loons out there who believe that they have to decrease the population of the planet by billions. And those people, such as, let's say, I believe Bill Gates is part of this crowd. And Bill Gates keeps funding all of this medical research and stuff, which in Africa, he's given plenty of vaccines out that are making the women infertile. And the world, there is evidence of this, and the world sits quietly by because, after all, Bill Gates is a prominent, rich man, and he's sharing some of that wealth for the people who would be important to speak up about this and do something about. It keeps them quiet, and that's just shameful. But anyway, I've already ranted probably far too much on this subject, but let me close with just saying Dr. Fauci needs to be in prison. If Dr. Fauci is not at least charged, that's pushback. Right now he's got half a dozen attorneys, and that's costing him tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's pushback. It may not be putting him in jail, but it's taking the money that he so aptly stole. And that's what we need to see, more pushback. And we are seeing some pushback from Congress, from the Republicans in Congress. They are having these committee hearings, and they are exposing stuff. And they're making referrals to the DOJ, and nothing happens. And you have to wonder why not. And I know enough about the legal system to know that there's been more than ample time to get indictments. Because when they make these criminal referrals, they're attaching all of the evidence that supports their allegations. They've done all the hard work for the DOJ. Now it's just running it through the process, and yet that's not happening. And, Dr. Fauci is responsible. Let me put it this way. Dr. Fauci is really the modern-day equivalent of that guy that used to run Germany, had the little mustache and stuff, and was involved in a big war, and ultimately, fortunately, at the end, lost his life. But, Dr. Fauci is equally responsible for millions upon millions of deaths. And I've lost hope, really, that anything is going to happen in this country to make him accountable. But there are a lot of other Western countries who also had substantial deaths. And Dr. Fauci doesn't have a part in those countries. So I hope some of those countries pursue criminal charges against Dr. Fauci, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I really am not going to hold my breath on it. I think that these people will get away with their criminal activity, and so at some point in time in the future, I think that they will get put back in power, and when that happens, Americans shouldn't open their mouth and complain, because now is the time where these issues need to be fixed, and the public really is just idly sitting by quietly. And so, sadly, I believe that they're going to get what they deserve. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I can come back here at some point in time and say, boy, did I ever have this whole thing wrong. But I don't think that's the case. With that, I wish you all a great day. Stay safe. It's a crazy world out there. Bye-bye.